The rooftop was alive with the hum of Chicago's summer night, but all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. I stood there, 25, black, and terrified, staring at Ethan, my straight-as-an-arrow roommate, who was looking at me like he'd just seen the stars for the first time. How did we get here, on the edge of something neither of us could name, after one reckless night that shattered everything we thought we knew? My name is Jalen Carter, and I'd spent the last year sharing a cramped apartment in Wicker Park with Ethan Hayes, a 26-year-old graphic designer with a grin that could charm a brick wall. Ethan was the kind of guy who'd never met a stranger, white, broad-shouldered, with messy brown hair and a laugh that filled every room. He was straight, or so I thought, and I'd spent months burying my feelings for him, convinced they'd never see the light of day. I was a barista by day, an aspiring poet by night, pouring my heart into words I never showed anyone, especially not him. But that summer night, under a sky bruised with purples and oranges, everything changed. It started innocently enough. Ethan had dragged me to a rooftop party hosted by his coworker, Mara, a 30-year-old queer woman with a knack for throwing chaotic, unforgettable bashes. The rooftop was strung with fairy lights, the air thick with the scent of grilled food and weed. I was nursing a beer, trying to blend into the background, when Ethan stumbled over, his cheeks flushed from too many shots of tequila. "Jalen, man, you gotta dance," he slurred, grabbing my arm. I laughed, brushing him off, but his touch lingered longer than it should have. His green eyes locked on mine, and for a split second, the world stopped. "Ethan, you're drunk," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Maybe," he grinned, leaning closer, "but I'm not blind." His words hit like a freight train. I froze, my beer bottle sweating in my hand. As he swayed closer, his breath warm against my cheek. The party faded, the chatter, the music, the clink of glasses, until it was just us, standing too close, breathing too fast. Then he kissed me. It was clumsy, desperate, and so damn real. My heart exploded, and before I knew it, I was kissing him back, the world tilting under my feet. The next morning, I woke up on our couch, my head pounding, Ethan's jacket draped over me. He was in the kitchen, flipping pancakes like nothing had happened. "Morning, poet," he called, his voice casual but his eyes avoiding mine. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but fear glued my lips shut. Had it been a drunken mistake? A fluke? Or was Ethan, my straight roommate, not so straight after all? The days that followed were torture. Ethan acted normal, cracking jokes, blasting his indie rock playlists, leaving dishes in the sink. But there was a new tension between us, a current I couldn't ignore. I caught him staring when he thought I wasn't looking, his brow furrowed like he was solving a puzzle. I threw myself into work, scribbling poetry in the margins of napkins at the cafe, trying to make sense of my feelings. But every night, back in our apartment, the air crackled with what we weren't saying. One evening, a week later, I couldn't take it anymore. I found Ethan sketching at the kitchen table, his pencil scratching furiously against paper. "We need to talk," I said, my voice shaking. He looked up, his face a mix of guilt and defiance. "About what?" he asked, but his eyes betrayed him. "You know what?" I shot back, my heart racing. "That night, the kiss. What the hell was that, Ethan?" He set his pencil down, his hands trembling. "I don't know, Jalen. I've been trying to figure it out. I've never," he trailed off, running a hand through his hair. "I'm not gay. At least, I didn't think I was. But you, God, you're in my head all the time." My breath caught, This was it, the moment where everything could break or bloom. I wanted to tell him how I'd loved him for months, how his laugh was the best part of my day, how that kiss had rewritten my entire world. But fear clawed at me. What if this was just a phase for him? What if I poured my heart out, and he walked away? "Ethan," I said softly, stepping closer. "What do you want?" He stood, closing the distance between us, his eyes searching mine. "I want to figure this out. With you. If you'll let me." That was the second night that changed us. We didn't kiss again. Not yet. But we talked until dawn, unraveling our fears, our hopes, our truths. Ethan admitted he'd never questioned his sexuality before, but something about me, about us, had cracked open a part of him he'd never explored. I told him about the poems I'd written, the ones I'd hidden, filled with him. For the first time, I felt seen not just as Jalen the roommate, but as Jalen the man who loved him. But love, I learned, is never simple. Ethan's family, conservative, small-town folks from Indiana, wouldn't understand. My friends, a tight-knit group of queer artists, warned me about falling for a straight guy. The world outside our apartment wasn't kind to stories like ours. And yet, every glance, every brush of his hand, made me believe we could rewrite the rules. As summer burned on, we teetered on the edge of something bigger, something neither of us could control. But the real test was coming. A weekend trip to Ethan's hometown, where secrets don't stay buried, and love like ours would be put to the fire. The drive to Ethan's hometown, a sleepy Indiana town called Cloverdale, was a 4-hour blur of cornfields and nervous silence. Ethan gripped the steering wheel of his beat-up Honda, his knuckles white, while I stared out the window, my stomach twisting. We were headed to his family's annual summer barbecue, a tradition he hadn't missed in years, and I was the roommate tagging along. Except now, we both knew I was more. The tension from that rooftop kiss had only grown in the weeks since. We hadn't kissed again, but we'd danced around it. Late-night talks on the couch, his hand lingering on my shoulder, my heart racing every time he smiled. Ethan was wrestling with himself, caught between who he'd always been and who he might be becoming. I wanted to be patient, but every day felt like a tightrope walk over a canyon of hope and fear. Cloverdale was a postcard of small-town America. White picket fences, a single stoplight, and a diner where everyone knew your name. Ethan's parents, Tom and Linda, lived in a modest 2-story house with a sprawling backyard. Tom, a burly 55-year-old with a farmer's tan, greeted us with a handshake that could crush bones. Linda, 53, warm but sharp-eyed, hugged me like she was sizing me up. "So you're Jalen," she said, her smile polite but curious. "Ethan talks about you all the time." I shot Ethan a look, but he was busy unloading bags from the trunk, his face unreadable. The barbecue was already in full swing. Kids running through sprinklers, neighbors gossiping over lemonade, classic rock blaring from a portable speaker. Ethan's older sister, Claire, a 32-year-old nurse with a no-nonsense vibe, pulled me aside. "You're good for him," she whispered, her eyes knowing. "He's different since you moved in. Happier." My heart stuttered, but I just nodded, unsure how much she'd guessed. That night, after the guests left and the fireflies came out, Ethan and I sat on the back porch, sharing a beer. The air was thick with the scent of charred wood and summer grass. "This place," Ethan said, his voice low, "it's home, but it's also a cage. My dad, he's got ideas about what a man should be." He looked at me, his eyes raw. "I don't know how to tell them about us. If there even is an US. There could be," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "If you want there to be." He reached for my hand, his fingers brushing mine, and for a moment, it was just us against the world. But then the screen door creaked, and Tom stepped out, his shadow looming. Ethan yanked his hand back, and my heart sank. "You boys okay?" Tom asked, his tone casual but his eyes narrowing. "Yeah, Dad," Ethan said quickly, standing. "Just catching up." Tom nodded, but I felt his gaze linger on me, heavy with questions he didn't ask. The rest of the weekend was a tightrope act. Ethan playing the perfect son, me playing the perfect roommate, both of us hiding the truth. But secrets have a way of slipping out. On our last night, Claire cornered Ethan in the kitchen while I was grabbing water. I overheard her through the cracked door. "Ethan, I see how you look at him," she said softly. "You don't have to hide. Not from me." "I'm not hiding," Ethan snapped, but his voice cracked. I don't know what I'm doing, Claire." "You're falling in love," she said, matter of fact, "and it's scaring the hell out of you." I slipped away before Ethan could respond, my heart pounding. Love. The word felt too big, too dangerous, but it fit. I was falling for him, too, and it was terrifying. Back in Chicago, we'd have to face it, whatever it was. But Cloverdale wasn't done with us yet. The next morning, as we packed to leave, Tom pulled Ethan aside. I couldn't hear their conversation, but Ethan's face was pale when he climbed into the car. "He knows something," Ethan said, his voice tight. "He asked if we were more than roommates." I lied, said we were just friends. The drive back was quieter than the way there. I wanted to scream that I wasn't just his friend, that I was in love with him, but the words stuck in my throat. Ethan's hands shook on the wheel, and I knew he was fighting a war inside himself. One I couldn't fight for him. Back in Chicago, our apartment felt different, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Ethan threw himself into work, staying late at his design studio, while I poured my heart into poetry, filling notebooks with words I couldn't say out loud. But the distance between us grew, and I started to wonder if that night on the rooftop had been a dream. Then, one rainy evening, Ethan came home soaked, his eyes wild. "I can't do this anymore," he said, his voice breaking. "I can't keep pretending I don't feel this." He stepped closer, water dripping onto the floor, and kissed me hard, desperate, like he was drowning and I was air. This time, there was no alcohol to blame, no crowd to hide us, just us, raw and real. But love, I was learning, wasn't enough to erase fear. Ethan's family, his past, the world we lived in, they were all waiting to test us. And the biggest test was yet to come. Ethan's kiss in our rain-soaked apartment felt like a dam breaking, flooding my world with hope and terror. We stood there, breathless, his wet shirt clinging to his chest, my hands trembling as I touched his face. But even as we kissed, I felt the weight of the world outside our door, ready to tear us apart. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Ethan and I stopped pretending, letting ourselves fall into something neither of us fully understood. We'd cook dinner together, laughing over burnt pasta, or sit on the couch watching old movies, our legs tangled under a blanket. He'd sketch me while I wrote poetry, his pencil capturing the curve of my jaw, my words capturing the ache in my heart. At 25, I'd never felt so alive, so seen. But Ethan, at 26, was still grappling with what it meant to love a man, especially me. Our friends noticed the shift. Mara, the rooftop party host, grinned when she saw us holding hands at a bar. "About damn time," she said, raising her glass. But my queer artist friends were less convinced. "Be careful, Jalen," said Kai, a 28-year-old non-binary painter, over coffee. Straight guys experimenting can break your heart. I nodded, but deep down I believed Ethan was different. He had to be. Then came the call that changed everything. Ethan's phone buzzed one evening while we were sprawled on the couch. It was Claire, his sister, her voice tight through the speaker. "Dad's in the hospital," she said. "Heart attack. You need to come home." Ethan's face drained of color. We packed in a frenzy and drove back to Cloverdale that night, the silence between us heavy with unspoken fears. At the hospital, Tom was stable but weak, hooked up to machines that beeped like a countdown. Linda clung to Ethan, her eyes red from crying, while Claire squeezed my hand, whispering, "He'll be okay." But I wasn't so sure. Not about Tom, not about us. Ethan stayed by his father's bedside, barely eating, barely sleeping. I hovered on the edges, feeling like an outsider in their family's grief. One night, as I brought coffee to the waiting room, I overheard Tom talking to Ethan. "You're my son," Tom said, his voice raspy. "I just want you to be happy. But this thing with Jalen, it's not right." My heart stopped. Ethan didn't respond, but when he emerged from the room, his eyes were hollow. "He doesn't get it," he muttered, slumping into a chair beside me. "He thinks it's a choice, a sin. Then show him it's not," I said, my voice fiercer than I felt. "Show him who you are." Ethan looked at me, his eyes searching, but he didn't answer. The rest of the week was a blur of hospital visits and tense family dinners. Linda was kind but distant, her smile strained. Claire was our only ally, slipping me reassuring glances when Ethan wasn't looking. But the weight of Tom's words hung over us, and I could feel Ethan pulling away, retreating into the version of himself Cloverdale expected. Back in Chicago, the distance grew. Ethan started spending more time at work, coming home late with excuses about deadlines. I tried to give him space, but every cold shoulder felt like a knife. My poetry turned dark, filled with images of broken bridges and fading stars. I wondered if Kai was right, if Ethan's feelings were just a phase, a summer fling he'd regret. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I found Ethan at his desk, sketching furiously. "Talk to me?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "Are you ashamed of me? Of us?" He flinched, dropping his pencil. "It's not you, Jalen. It's everything. My dad, this city, the way people look at us. I'm trying to be brave, but I'm scared." "Then let me help you," I said, stepping closer. "We can face it together." He stood, his eyes glistening. "I want to. God, I want to. But what if I'm not strong enough?" I took his hand, my heart pounding. "You are. And I'm not going anywhere." That night, we held each other, not speaking, just breathing in sync. It wasn't a fix, but it was a start. Ethan was still fighting his demons, his family, his past, his own identity, but he was fighting. And I was fighting for him, for us, even as the world tried to pull us apart. But the world wasn't done with us. A letter arrived from Cloverdale, addressed to Ethan in Tom's shaky handwriting. I watched him open it, his face unreadable, and I knew whatever was inside would either break us or make us stronger. The letter from Tom sat unopened on our kitchen table for 2 days, a silent grenade waiting to detonate. Ethan avoided it, burying himself in work, while I tried to focus on my poetry, my words sharp with fear. Finally, on a stormy Chicago evening, Ethan grabbed the envelope, his hands shaking as he tore it open. "It's from Dad," he said, his voice barely audible over the rain battering our windows. He read in silence, his face shifting from confusion to pain to something I couldn't name. When he finished, he handed me the letter without a word. It was short, written in Tom's uneven scrawl. He apologized for his words at the hospital, saying he'd been scared, not just for his health, but for Ethan. "I don't understand your life," he wrote, "but I want to try. Come home for Thanksgiving. Bring Jalen." I looked at Ethan, my heart in my throat. "He's trying," I said softly. Ethan nodded, but his eyes were distant. "He's trying, but it's not acceptance. Not yet." Thanksgiving was 2 weeks away, and the prospect of returning to Cloverdale hung over us like a storm cloud. Ethan was quieter than ever, wrestling with what it meant to face his family as his true self. I wanted to be his anchor, but doubt gnawed at me. What if Tom's letter was a trap? What if Ethan wasn't ready to be out? We threw ourselves into our routines, pretending everything was fine. I worked extra shifts at the cafe, scribbling poems about love and fear in the margins of receipts. Ethan stayed late at his studio, designing posters for a local queer film festival, a project he'd taken on without telling me, a small sign he was trying to embrace this new part of himself. But at home, the tension lingered, a silent question neither of us dared ask. Could we survive Cloverdale? One night, Mara invited us to a queer open mic at a dive bar in Logan Square. I read a poem about Ethan, my voice shaking as I described the way his laugh lit up my world. The crowd cheered, but Ethan's eyes were locked on me, glistening with pride and something deeper. After he pulled me outside, the November air sharp against our skin. "You make me want to be brave," he said, his voice low. He kissed me, soft and sure, under a flickering streetlight. For the first time, I felt like we might make it. But Cloverdale was waiting. We drove back the day before Thanksgiving, the car heavy with unspoken fears. The barbecue had been one thing. Ethan could hide behind the roommate label then. But this was different. Tom's letter had opened a door, but neither of us knew what was on the other side. The dinner was tense, the table laden with turkey and secrets. Linda fussed over the food, her smiles forced. Claire was warm, joking to ease the mood, but Tom was quiet, his eyes flickering between Ethan and me. After dessert, he asked Ethan to help with dishes, and I knew it was more than a chore. I waited on the porch, my breath visible in the cold, until Ethan emerged, his face pale but resolute. "He asked if I love you," he said, sitting beside me. I told him I do. My heart stopped. What did he say? He didn't say much, just nodded, said he needs time. Ethan took my hand, his fingers cold but steady. "But I meant it, Jalen. I love you." I wanted to cry, to kiss him, to freeze that moment forever. But love, I was learning, wasn't just a feeling, it was a fight, and we were about to face our biggest battle yet. The next morning, a neighbor stopped by, a grizzled man named Hank who'd known Ethan since childhood. He'd heard rumors, small towns talk, and his questions were sharp, laced with judgment. "You're not one of those, are you, Ethan?" he asked, his voice low but cutting. Ethan stiffened, but he didn't back down. "If you mean am I with Jalen, then yeah, I am." Hank's face hardened, and he left without a word. But the damage was done, word spread, and by evening Cloverdale was buzzing. Ethan's phone lit up with texts from old friends, some supportive, some cruel. I watched him read them, his jaw tight, and I knew he was standing at a crossroads. That night we lay in his childhood bed, the room filled with ghosts of who he used to be. "I'm not ashamed of you," he whispered, his voice fierce. "I'm not." "Then don't hide," I said, my hand on his chest. "Be you. All of you." He kissed me, and for the first time it felt like a promise. But promises are fragile, and Cloverdale wasn't done testing us. Back in Chicago, Ethan's confession of love felt like a lifeline, but Cloverdale's shadow followed us. The gossip had spread, and Ethan's phone kept buzzing with messages. Some from friends offering support, others from strangers spitting venom. He tried to shrug it off, but I saw the toll it took. The way his shoulders slumped when he thought I wasn't watching. At 26, he was rebuilding his identity, and I, at 25, was learning that love meant carrying someone else's pain as much as their joy. We leaned on each other. Ethan started joining me at queer events, his hand in mine, his smile a mix of nerves and defiance. I read more poems at open mics, each one a love letter to him, and he'd sketch me in the crowd, his drawings capturing the parts of me I'd always hidden. But the world wasn't kind. At the cafe, a regular customer saw us holding hands and stopped coming. At Ethan's studio, a client pulled a project, citing personal differences. One night, as snow dusted Chicago streets, Ethan came home with a split lip. "Some asshole at a bar," he said, waving off my panic. Thought he'd teach me a lesson. My blood boiled, but Ethan just pulled me close, his voice steady. "It's worth it, Jalen. You're worth it." His words broke me open. I'd spent so long guarding my heart, afraid he'd walk away, but here he was, bruised but unyielding. We made love that night, slow and tender, every touch a promise to fight for each other. But love, I knew, needed more than promises. It needed a future. Spring brought change. Ethan's dad called, his voice softer than before. "I've been reading," Tom said, awkward but earnest, "about your life. I don't get it all, but I want you here. Both of you." It wasn't full acceptance, but it was a start. Linda sent a care package, cookies, and a note saying she was trying. Claire visited, hugging us both, her pride fierce. We started building a life together, not just as roommates but as partners. Ethan designed a logo for my poetry chapbook, a collection I finally had the courage to publish. I got a job teaching writing workshops, my words reaching kids who felt as lost as I once did. We moved to a bigger apartment in Andersonville, a neighborhood alive with queer joy, and hung fairy lights on our balcony, a nod to that rooftop night. But the real turning point came one summer evening, a year after that first kiss. We hosted a party on our new balcony, surrounded by friends Mara, Kai, Claire, and even a few of Ethan's old Cloverdale buddies who'd come around. As the sun set, Ethan pulled me to the railing, his eyes bright. "I was scared as hell last year," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Thought I'd lose everything if I loved you, but I gained everything instead." He dropped to one knee, holding a simple silver ring. "Jalen Carter, will you marry me?" The world stopped. My heart roared. "Yes," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Our friends cheered, but all I saw was Ethan, his smile brighter than the city lights. We're not naive. The world still has sharp edges, hateful words, judging eyes, families that take time to heal. But that night, as we danced under the stars, I knew we'd face it together. Ethan, my straight roommate, had turned my world upside down, and I'd turned his. Together, we'd rewritten our story, not as a tragedy, but as a love that defied the odds. Our wedding was small, on a rooftop in Chicago, with fairy lights and poetry and love so fierce it drowned out the noise. Tom was there, quiet but present, his hand on Ethan's shoulder. Linda cried, her smile real this time. Claire officiated, her voice steady with pride. As I looked at Ethan, my husband, I thought of that summer night that changed us. It wasn't just a kiss. It was a spark that lit a fire, one that burned through fear and doubt to reveal who we were meant to be. Together, we'd faced the world and won, not because we were perfect, but because we were us, flawed, fierce, and forever.